chapter 3. The Mishnah starts out, one who reads the Megillah.
I think Ben is asking something, but he's muted.
I'm sorry?
I think Ben was saying something, but he's muted.
Yeah, I was muted. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask, when do you estimate to be done with the review?
I'm working on it. I hope that in the next week or two, I should be ready with the questions, and then I will share it with you. And there's no rush to.
Yeah, but the review has to be done before you get to the questions.
Oh well,
our review. That's what I'm saying.
That's ideally. So I already started working on it, and I hope to try to finish it as quickly as I can, so that you can have it while we're doing the review, so that you can remember what you've learned and solidify it with looking at the questions and finding the answers. So
Okay.
you know what? Maybe what I'll try to do.
I thought you should do perek by perek, but that's up to you.
Right. So maybe what I'll try to do is by tomorrow I'll try to finish for the second perek, and then I'll keep going for the third perek, and I'll send that out later. Okay, maybe I'll do that. Okay, moving along. Chapter 3. One who reads the Megillah, if he wants, he can read it standing, or if he wants, he can read it sitting. Okay. Now, if a person read it for the congregation, or if two people read it aloud simultaneously for the congregation has fulfilled their obligation. Now, in a place where they have adopted a custom to the Megillah, which we're talking about, not before, but after reading the Megillah, right? Then you can make the blessing after. If you're in a place where the custom is not to recite the blessing after, then you don't need to recite the blessing after. Now, once we already started talking about the reading of the Megillah, we move on to talk about the reading on Monday and Thursday and Shabbos at Mincha. We're told 3 people are called up to reading the Torah in the synagogue on those days, on Monday and Thursday, and you do not add and you do not subtract from that number. There has to be at least 3 people being called up, and you do not add or subtract from that number. But also, we do not conclude with the reading selection of the prophets on the Monday or the Thursday or Shabbos afternoon. And the reason for Shabbos afternoon is because there's no time, right? And the reason why on Monday and Thursdays, people are rushing, people are busy, they need to go to work. If you read more than 3 aliyahs, people are not going to be able to stick around. So that's why we say we don't add to the 3 people that called up on Monday, Thursday, or Shabbos afternoon. Now, the Mishnah continues and says that the one who commences and the one who concludes the reading of the Torah, they recite a blessing before it and after it, which means to say the first guy would say the opening blessing and the last guy would say the final blessing. That's the way we have it stated initially in our Mishnah. The Gemara will discuss what the actual practice is today. Now, what about Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed? Says on Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, 4 people are called up to the reading of the Torah. We don't add or subtract from them for the same reason, because Rosh Chodesh is a day, it's still a work day. People still go to work. So therefore, although maybe there's a bit of diminishing of the work slightly, right? But nevertheless, we don't want to add too much because then people couldn't stay. So we add 1 aliyah, but we don't read the Haftorah, and we don't add to the people who are called up. Now, the same principle applies, as we mentioned before. The guy who starts makes the blessing. The guy who concludes makes the final blessing. So this is the principle. Anytime where you have an addition, which means an addition of the sacrifices, but it also means nowadays when we don't have sacrifices, but we have an additional prayer in the place of the sacrifices. So anytime when there is an addition, but it's not Yom Tov, right? 4 people are read. So that would be Chol HaMoed, and it would be Rosh Chodesh. In those times, we have 4 people being called up. Yes.
I understand what you're saying about Rosh Chodesh because people are still working, but I thought Chol HaMoed you're supposed to not.
Right, but there are exceptions to the rule of not working, and those are things that are going to be lost, right? It's called davar ha'ovid, right? Those things the rabbis allowed for people to go and do work. So if there was going to be, let's say, a business deal where somebody was going to lose a lot of money if he didn't go ahead and make that deal and work on that deal, then the rabbis said that in that case it is possible. Likewise, if there's something in the field that's going to be completely ruin the field, then those things, if you didn't go to take care of it, those things the rabbis did permit. So therefore, even though you're right that there's supposed to be less work, and if at all possible, on Chol you should do no work, but nevertheless, because it's still permissible to do some work. So for the people who need to go to work, right, for them, we don't want to inconvenience them too much. So we just say we'll add one aliyah, but not more than that, only 4. Now, what about in Yom Tov? On Yom Tov, we only call up 5, not the 7 like we do on Shabbos, but only 5. Why? Well, the reason is because we want to give people a chance to enjoy the Yom Tov meal, right? Because it's a special mitzvah to enjoy the food on Yom Tov. So we let them go home to enjoy their food, so we don't have a longer reading of the Torah, or a much longer reading. That's why we only call up 5. On Yom Kippur, we call up 6, and on Shabbos, we call up 7. We do not subtract to them. And there's a discussion whether this applies to both Shabbos and Yom Kippur, but let's just go with Shabbos for now. We don't subtract from the number of people that are called up on Shabbos. It's at least 7, but we can add to them. And when it comes to the Haftarah, right? So we do read a selection from the prophets. And again, the same principle as we mentioned before, those who open the reading, the start of the reading, like the Kohen, he would make the first blessing, and the person who concludes, he would make the final blessing. Now, remember, in those days, it's not like today, where you have an official Baal Koreh who reads from the Torah, but rather, any person who was called up to the Torah, he would come up, and then he himself would read. So, the first one to come up to read, he would make the first blessing, and he would read, and the last one to come up to actually read from the Torah, he would be the one to make the final blessing. Okay, so far so good. Says the Gemara, our Mishnah said that you can say the Megillah standing or sitting. So this was taught in a brisa that this is true only of the Megillah, but not of the reading from the Torah. When it comes to reading from the Torah, you have to stand when reading in front of a congregation. Where do we know this, right? How do you know that the Torah reader has to stand? So the Gemara answers that it says with regards to Moshe, that you should stand here together with me so that I can teach you. So Rabbi says, right, if not, were it not for the fact that the verse says that you stand here together with me, I would never be able to speak about Hashem standing. But since he told Moshe, stand with me, that teaches me that Hashem was standing when he taught, whatever that means, right? When we speak about Hashem, it's obviously all anthropomorphic, but the fact that it uses the expression stand together with me, it teaches me that when reading in front of others, you've got to be standing like Hashem was standing when he taught the Moshe. So too, in the synagogue, when we read from the Torah, the Baal Koreh has to be standing. And the related teaching by Rabbi Bo is that, from where do we know that a teacher should not sit while on the couch while teaching Torah to his students who are sitting on the ground? Because we see the way Hashem behaved together with Moshe, that Hashem behaved in the same manner that Moshe did. If Moshe is standing, Hashem is standing. So too, the teacher should not take a position that is more comfortable for himself while his students are in a less comfortable position, like sitting on the floor. Okay, so now the rabbis taught in a brisa that from the days of Moshe until Rabbi Gamliel, no one would learn from Torah in any other way but standing, which means not just reading from the Torah in the synagogue on a Shabbos, but in general, they would be standing up the whole time when they would learn Torah. But after Rabbi Gamliel passed away, then feebleness came into the world, and everybody started learning Torah sitting down. There are still some people and places where they have these standards and they stand and they learn standing. It's impressive, but not everybody's capable of doing that. And so today we sit when we learn Torah. It's not that you're not allowed to stand; you're allowed to stand. But it's just up until Rabbi Gamliel's days, they all learned standing, right? And you have to understand, we're not talking about learning, an hour Gemara after davening. We're talking about they learned all day. People who learned all day, they would do it standing. That's incredible. Now, the Gemara observes, right, that we've learned in the Mishnah that when Rabbi Gamliel passed away, from that time, the kavod HaTorah, meaning the honor and the glory given to the Torah, ceased. Why? Because of what we just mentioned over here, that people stop standing. So now, in one verse, it says, with regards to Moshe, that he sat on the mountain. But we just mentioned previously, just over here, right, that it says that I stood on the mountain. So was he standing or was he sitting? The Gemara tries to resolve this by saying that when he was learning with Hashem, so then he was learning from Hashem, right? Then he was standing, but when he would go and sit and review it himself, then he would be sitting. So Hanina says that no, Moshe was not standing or sitting, but he was bowing. Okay, he was bowing. Why? Because he was trying to show respect to Hashem. If you stand erect in the presence of Hashem, it could be a display of some lack of humility, lack of honor. So Moshe, while he was standing on the mountain, he stood there, but he stood there while he was in a bent down position. So that's why the pasuk describes it as not standing and not sitting, but both, right? In other words, it says both. He was sitting on the mountain and says he was standing on the mountain, to tell me that it was somewhere in between. Okay, now, Reb Chanin, one second. Rabbi Yechanan says that there's no problem to begin with, because you're misunderstanding the verse. The verse, when it says, and I sat on the mountain, don't understand it literally sitting like a person would sit. But anytime it says yeshiva can also mean to stay in a place. Like it says with regards to the Jewish people and with regards to the Jewish people, it says that and you remained in Kaddish many days, and it uses the word vateshu, and you sat, which means you remained. So likewise, when it says with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu that he sat on the mountain, right? It doesn't mean he sat literally. He stayed on the mountain. That's what it means. Rava says that that Moshe studied the easy portions of the Torah standing, and the difficult portions he studied sitting. Each one gives their own explanation as to how to be contradicting each other. And I think we'll stop over here for today. I wish you all a wonderful day, and I will see you Be'ezus Hashem tomorrow. I will try to have the questions ready by tomorrow. If I can't, then it will be the day after. Okay, so either tomorrow or the day after.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No problem. All the best.